Jocelyn K Glei, writer and author, is here to help us out and give us her best tips on how to avoid digital distraction. Welcome, Jocelyn.
If you walk through the garden, you better watch your back.
Good morning. So 29,000 hours. This is how much time over the course of your entire professional career, so let's say about 45 years potentially, that you could spend on email. That's 3.3 years of your life that you could spend on email. So how do we get to that number? The average person now receives about 200 email messages a day, spends about 2.5 hours a day on email, and spends about 30% of their total work week managing email. And that's the low end for some people. So is it useful? Is that a good way to spend our time? Well, a recent piece that was published in the Harvard Business Review found that managers spend about 50% of their time on email. I imagine a lot of you in here are managers, on emails that should not have even been sent to them, or emails that they really didn't need to respond to. So they're spending about 50% of their time on emails, on messages that are completely irrelevant to anything that they actually need to accomplish. 37,000 hours. This is how many hours you could potentially spend over the course of your career in meetings. 4.2 years of your life spent in meetings. How does that happen? 2 days a week are usually spent in meetings for senior managers, and about 15% of an organization's overall time is typically spent in meetings. So are we using that time well? Well, those same researchers found that senior executives rated about half of the meetings that they attended as ineffective or very ineffective. So not so much. 42,000 hours. This is how many hours you could spend on multitasking over the course of your entire professional career. Almost 5 years of your life multitasking. Is that a constructive way to spend your time? Well, this is a quote from David Meyer, who's one of the premier researchers of multitasking. He says, even the brief mental blocks created by shifting between tasks can cost as much as up to 40% of your productivity. 40% of your productivity spent on multitasking. Now, why does that happen? It happens because every time we switch between tasks, so let's say you're focused on, let's say, putting together a PowerPoint for a talk you're going to give, or you're writing a proposal, and you say to yourself, oh, let me just go, I'm going to go quickly check my email and I'm going to come back. What happens when you do that is that you incur a switching cost. It typically takes about 25 minutes to get back up to speed, to get back up to the level of focus that you were at before you interrupted yourself. Now, I'm sure some of you are saying, oh, I'm good at multitasking. I've heard this before. In fact, actually only about 2% of the population can effectively multitask. So 98% of us in the room, basically everybody in the room, probably is not any good at multitasking. It's not constructive as a way to work. So why am I sharing all these terrifying numbers with you guys? Okay, it's not just to like bum you out. It's because I actually want to make a point. And that point is that we've gotten very good at making time for busy work, and I think we've gotten very bad at making time for our best work. And so I want to introduce a new concept sort of based on a familiar idea, an idea that in fact has already come up a lot today, and that's fake news, right? You hear about it all the time. Steve just talked about it. They talked about it in the earlier session. This unfortunate man, who I now have to be affiliated with as an American, talks about it quite frequently. But one of the reasons that I'm really glad that we're all sort of more aware of fake news is I think that it's making us more conscious of something that we were all sort of intuitively aware of, but are now becoming even more conscious of. And that's that everyone is trolling for your attention all the time, right? There's all these different tools and apps and distractions that are constantly trying to grab your attention and hold onto it. But I think there's something that's draining away even more time and energy and attention from our work than things like fake news, and that's fake productivity. So let's look at a couple of alternative facts related to fake productivity. This idea that busy is better. This idea that more is better. This idea that faster is better, right? These are they're almost values that we've all started to internalize, but they're not really human values. They're not really the values that actually underpin real productivity, that underpin real creativity, or that drive innovation, right? They're the values of technology. They're the values of the tools and the apps that we use. And technology is accelerating exponentially, and we're all kind of trying to keep up. But I think what happens is, I reference this kind of old adage a lot: tools make excellent servants, but very poor masters. And I think we've arrived at this point where we've really let our tools become our master. And we have to kind of figure out how to flip that script and take back some control. Because if we don't, rather than wisely investing our time in activities that actually help us advance our work, advance our careers, grow our businesses, we're just going to be sitting at work killing time, right? Now, there are reasons why we fall into this trap of fake productivity, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that the technologists who create the apps and the tools that we use on a daily basis have become very good at tapping into the brain chemistry and the behavioral triggers that capture our attention. And so I want to talk today about a couple of 3 different psychological concepts that really drive our addiction to fake productivity. And then I'm going to share a couple of tips for how we can kind of reverse that trend and focus less on busy work and more on our best work as we go along the way. So the first concept is this idea of random rewards, why we love checking our email, why we love checking our social media feeds. And to understand random rewards, just think about your email like a slot machine, right? So most of the time you play a slot machine, right? You pull the lever, you check your email, you kind of lose, right? You get an email from your boss asking you to do something you don't really feel like doing. You get an email from an angry customer, something kind of annoying, right? But every once in a while, you pull that lever, you check your email, and you get something great. You know, maybe your mom sent you a great cat video. Or you get invited to speak at a TEDx conference, and it's flattering, builds up your ego, right? And so it's those random rewards, those unexpected, happy surprises that are kind of mixed in with all that junk, all those distractions, all those annoying requests. That's what keeps us coming back for more. It makes us want to keep checking and checking and checking again, even when maybe we should be doing something else. And that's because it activates this sort of primal seeking mechanism in our brains. And of course, you know, email isn't the only random rewards machine. They surround us everywhere, right? Text messaging, Slack, all due respect to Steve, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, right? These random rewards machines are everywhere. So how do we start to resist that appeal of giving them so much attention, of kind of falling into these distractions, of falling into this busy work? Well, I think we have to kind of ask ourselves a new question, which is, do you want random rewards or do you want real rewards? And if you're able to start to get very clear on your real rewards, what you really want to accomplish in the grand scheme of things, where you really want to go, where you're headed proactively, it becomes a bit easier to resist this reactive type of busy work. So just a couple simple concepts to think about. Sitting down every 3 months, identifying your key goals. Don't just identify them in your mind and forget about them. Actually write them down. So this is my home office. I have this little box. I write down my goals. I post them up there. Just picking the 1, 2, 3 projects that are really going to help you move the needle on your career, that are really going to help you move the needle on your business. Writing them down, writing down just the key actions you need to take to get there. And then put them in your line of sight so you actually see them on a daily basis. So you're keeping sort of the big picture in mind of where you want to go. What are those real rewards for you? It becomes much easier to be less reactive. Second thing, very small change. A lot of us make to-do lists. I recommend making your to-do list the night before. It sounds like a small act. It's really powerful. Rather than, waking up in the morning, rolling over, picking up your phone, checking some emails, walking into work, opening your email, right? All of a sudden, a couple of hours, half the day goes by, you spend on other people's requests. It's not till the mid-afternoon, maybe you turn your attention to the stuff that you really want to accomplish. If you wake up in the morning, already have that to-do list in sight, or already incredibly clear on your priorities, or already incredibly clear on what your real rewards are, it becomes much easier to use that to prioritize all those additional requests against, and to be more focused on what you yourself actually want to accomplish. So just a few small ideas there. Second concept is this idea of completion bias. So again, a second piece of why we're so addicted to busy work. Basically, as humans, we're wired to seek completions, much like Jerry Maguire. And what that means is that we prefer to focus on quick, easy-to-finish tasks. When we recognize a task as complete, our brain releases dopamine. It makes us feel pleasure, and it makes us want to repeat those types of tasks again and again. So if you take this idea of completion bias, and let's come back to email, which we were talking about earlier, think about our obsession with inbox zero. Why are we so obsessed with it? We're obsessed with it because it's kind of the ultimate completion of email, right? But think about it, even as you're checking your email, right, even as you're sort of whittling down that unread message count, every time that number goes down, you're getting these like little mini hits of completion. And we find that very, very satisfying. It's very similar to a progress bar, right? And so technologists have recognized this bias towards completion, and they build progress bars into everything now, right? It keeps you engaged when you're downloading something. You look at your LinkedIn profile, it's 95% complete. So you want to go that extra 5% to complete it. So you're tapping into that idea of completion bias. Now, the problem is, it's very easy to see that progress in things like email, in these kind of busy work tasks, right? It's easy to log into your social media feeds and get rid of those 18 notifications. But when we're working on these kind of long-term creative projects, when we're working on the stuff that's really going to have an impact, whether you're building an iPhone app, or you're honing in on the right business model, or you're even writing a novel or a film or something of that nature, right? It takes days, weeks, months, and years to complete these projects. And we can often kind of lose sight of our progress in the process. So how can we kind of make that shift? I think the solution here is to think about how you can create progress hacks that make your creative work as addictive as email and other busy work. So one way you can do that is think about, identify a metric that's meaningful to you in the work that really matters. So for me, I'm a writer. Daily word count, the daily amount of words that I write, is a meaningful metric for me. If you're a software developer, it could be bugs fixed, or lines of code written, or even lines of code removed. If you're a salesperson, it could be the number of sales calls that you made. And again, write that down. So right under where I have my goals, I have a calendar in which I track my daily progress. I write down my daily word count. I also write down sort of key small wins, other things that I've accomplished that day. So noting down those metrics to sort of start to make that progress in those long-term, more meaningful projects visible to yourself is really motivational. The second piece of this is also think about, again, how you can make progress visible by maybe displaying all of your drafts or displaying iterations as a testament to your progress in your workspace. So this is my new book, Unsubscribe, which some of the stuff I'm talking about today comes from. But before I got to this finished product, I had to go through a lot of drafts. This is my coworker, Sadie. And so as I went through those drafts, I didn't just edit and then toss them away. I started stacking them up on my desk, right, as this kind of testament to my progress. And when I was at a moment in the book where I was struggling a little bit or was feeling challenged, I could kind of look at that and be like, okay, you've faced this before, you've gotten through it. And it was very, sort of inspirational, motivational. So thinking about how you can create testaments to your progress around your office, whether it's printing out drafts, whether it's displaying prototypes, whether it's printing out, different iterations of wireframes and tacking them up on the wall, that's going to help keep you engaged in those longer-term projects, being able to see that progress. Last idea I want to talk about is this concept of the rule of reciprocation. And this is part of why we get so stuck in this kind of reactive work, why we're so prone to let other people dictate what we do with our day through email or interruptions or other requests. And sort of the basis of the idea of the rule of reciprocation is that we as humans in all cultures around the world are trained sort of from birth to return a positive action with another positive action. So some examples of this: you walk down the street, someone says hello to you, you feel like you should say hello back. Someone gives you a birthday gift, you feel obligated to give them a birthday gift when their birthday rolls around. Someone writes you a thoughtful email, you feel obligated to reply to that email, and maybe a little bit guilty if you can't. This is Philip Kuntz, and he's a sociologist who in 1974 decided to test the rule of reciprocation. He wanted to see how powerful it was. This is in the dark ages, before the internet. So he looked people up in the phone book. He looked up 600 people, wrote down their addresses, and he created this custom holiday card. It had a picture of him and his family and a handwritten note, and he mailed them off. So he mailed them to 600 perfect strangers, and he wanted to see, would these people respond? What would happen? He wanted to test the rule of reciprocation. So after about 5 days, the replies started rolling in, and he ended up over 200 people out of the 600. These perfect strangers responded to them. They wrote back with news of their families, what was going on in their area. And some of those people continued to mail him Christmas cards 5, 10, or even 15 years later, right? Perfect strangers, people he'd never met. Now, that's a really powerful example of the rule of reciprocation, but let's fast forward, right? We're not in 1974 anymore, right? We're living in the internet age. We're living in the age of distraction, in my opinion. And what happens is we now live in this moment where really anyone with a smartphone has access to you, right? If I meet any of you in the audience, I get your name. I could log on to Google about 90 seconds. I can probably find your email. I can write you a message, I can show up in your inbox uninvited, and I can ask you to do something for me, right? And we all get these emails every day, right? That sort of 200 emails a day that most people are getting on average. So when you think about that in the context of this urge to reciprocate, that's where it can kind of start to bite us in the ass in the internet age, right? So we need to be conscious of this sort of urge to reciprocate, but we also need to know that we need to now, because of this kind of digital overload, of this easy access that people have to us, of the level of distraction and noise that's out there, we have to kind of view that through the lens of what are our actual priorities? What do we really want to accomplish? And we have to start to become very adept at saying no to some opportunities so that we can say yes to our priorities. So how can we sort of practice saying no? How can we get better at saying no to distractions? Well, one literal, very tactical way you can get better at saying no is shifting from saying I can't do something to saying I don't do something. So that's the difference between saying I can't check email on Saturdays versus I don't check email on Saturdays. Or the difference between saying I can't skip my gym workout or I don't skip my gym workout. And this is based on, there was a study that was done a couple of years ago, and they looked at trying to figure out how people could stick to their resolutions more effectively. And they found that when they used this don't terminology, they were much more likely to not miss their gym workout or to not check their email on Saturdays. And the kind of reasoning behind that was that, when you say can't, it sort of implies that you could do something, but you're choosing not to, right? If the circumstances were different, maybe you would do it. Whereas when you say that you don't do something, it kind of gives the idea of a hard and fast rule, a principle that you're sort of staunchly sticking to, right? So even just changing the way that you make those resolutions can be very powerful. Powerful for yourself internally, but also externally to use that different phraseology can appear a bit stronger rather than sort of the weaker I can't do something way of saying it. And then a second idea, and this is kind of the last tip that I want to share with you, and one of my favorite productivity ideas is this idea of making a stop doing list. So we all make to-do lists every day, right? But this idea of a stop doing list comes from Jim Collins, who's a best-selling business author. He wrote Built to Last and Good to Great, a number of other books. And the idea here is that you sit down. This is not a daily activity. This is, again, every 3 months, maybe every 6 months. And you sit down, you think about, okay, what are the things that are the biggest drag on my attention? What are the things that are the biggest drag on my productivity? What are the things that are really stealing my time? And you make a short list, let's say 5 or 6 things, that you want to stop doing. This is my list. I wrote a blog about a lot of the things I stopped doing recently. Some of them are I don't schedule meetings in the morning. I don't treat emails from people I don't know as urgent. I don't read the news, especially fake news. So if you guys take away just one idea from this talk today, I want it to be the idea that in this age of distraction, where we're also overbusy and overscheduled and overwhelmed, in many ways, productivity is about what you don't do, right? It's about learning how to say no. It's about learning how to peel away those distractions. And it's about learning how to treat our attention as the precious resource that it really is, right? Because if we don't learn how to do this, this is what our working lives are going to look like, right? I don't think any of us want to spend 12 years on busy work, right? I really like this Thoreau quote. The price of anything is the amount of life that you exchange for it, right? So how much life do we want to exchange for an empty inbox? How much life do we want to exchange to sit in mindless administrative meetings? How much life do we want to spend multitasking? I think this is the type of question that we need to start asking ourselves, because ultimately you can't fake it when it comes to the deep work that drives real creativity and innovation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. There was a lot of recognition in there for me. I know you said we're not good at multitasking, but I am good at multitasking. Okay.
2%.
I'm the exception, maybe. But we kind of all know this, you know, but we still keep working in ways that don't make us productive. Why do we do that?
Well, I mean, I think it's some of the things that we talk about. I think it's just, it's very alluring, right? These apps and these tools are designed in ways that are tapping into that brain chemistry, the stuff where we want those random rewards. We want to see that completion, you know? And I think so I think it's really challenging. I mean, I think the competitive advantage in this age of distraction is really that ability to find deep focus, that ability to concentrate, really like the ability to manage your attention is what gives you a competitive advantage at this particular moment in time.
Do you think that the fact that we use social media so much has kind of changed how we are able to focus on something for a while? Because there we get this constant new news and
totally. Yeah. I mean, I think email was the start of it, and then of course social media continues, right? And I think you know, attention is like a muscle, right? It's a skill. The same way that you can run a mile, or you can run 3 miles, or you can run a marathon, right? Attention works the same way. And if you're not exercising your ability to concentrate, you're not exercising your ability to focus, it deteriorates. And so I think, you know, I recommend, you know, that people batch process their email, and they only check their email 3 or 4 times a day, you know, and some people are like, the idea of not looking at their email for an hour or two is like, they're going to have a nervous breakdown or something, right? But it's because we're not used to exercising that muscle. So I think it is, I mean, it really is sort of a matter of training your attention and starting out small, even if it's something like using the Pomodoro method, where you do kind of 25-minute sprints of focus and then have a 5 or 10-minute break. You know, if you need to start out small, then start out small.
Yeah. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Yes. do you see technology as something that always makes us less productive, or do you have any good examples of the opposite?
Yeah, good question.
No, I mean, it's funny, I think about this a lot. Certainly it doesn't make us less productive. I mean, you know, you think about email or you think about something like Slack, the benefits, you know, that you get, you know, from being able to work remotely with someone in real time, say, using Slack are remarkable, you know. The ability that I have to, you know, manage an editorial team of 30 people all over the world via email is remarkable and is incredibly productive. But I think the key is that statement that I referenced earlier, right? This idea that tools make make great servants, but very poor masters, right? And so I think we have to be the master and we have to be in charge of those tools, but we're really stuck in this modality, I think, where we're, you know, just taking cues from our tools. And part of it is technology is accelerating so fast, so we get these new technologies and, you know, we're just sort of enjoying them and we're feeling entertained and we're not thinking about like the fact that it's sort of controlling us, you know. So I think we have to start to become a bit more conscious of that in order to make sure that, you know, these tools are only helping us with sort of real productivity and not this kind of fake busy work type of stuff.